All right, now you're ready for part 2 of graph interpretation. I want you to watch this video and later we'll gather for a live class so that we can discuss your contributions. We've already worked on analyzing a graph about fast food consumption in Australia by teenagers from 1975 to the year 2000. We saw how those trends changed over time, and we were able to explain to the reader, first beginning with the main idea and then going through the details. We used keywords and transition words to make sure that the reader understood what type of analysis we were doing in every sentence, whether we were noticing, comparing, contrasting, noting a probability or possibility, or concluding. Let's look at 3 graphs that are going to help us with our next assignment. This graph comes from the National Center for Education Statistics in the United States. It shows the location of bullying versus the percentage of students bullied in 2015. So up the left corner, our quantitative measure is the percent of students who are bullied. And the location of bullying is on the bottom. So we see that many students were bullied in hallways, classrooms, cafeterias, and there were fewer students that were bullied online, on the school bus, or in a locker room. And we can sort of wonder why and notice what those moments have in common. For example, students spend a lot of time in hallways or in classrooms, whereas they spend less time in a school bus or in a locker room, because they're probably only in a locker room right before changing for an athletic event like a sports activity. So first we give an overview of what we've seen, then we can go through and compare more specifically. So if we added up the percentages of students bullied in the hallways or the classroom, that would be the vast majority of where people were actually getting bullied. The cafeteria and the playground were cut down a bit more, and online, school bus, locker room, or somewhere else were much slimmer. But another thing we're noticing is that bullying is happening everywhere. We can also make some other suggestions as to why we think the trends we're seeing might be happening. I noticed, for example, that the cafeteria and the playground have very similar percentage of students getting bullied there. They're both around 20%. And I wonder if those percentages are lower because students from different classes are able to mix, and students who might not find that they have a ton of close friends in their particular section can connect with more of their close friends during cafeteria and playground or recess times. We know that friends are some of the best preventatives against bullying. If a student has a lot of close friends, they can recognize their own value, they can decrease the amount of value they're putting in what a bully is telling them, and they can resist any of the negative impacts of bullying. So maybe that's the reason those 2 percentages are very close together. Let's look at another graph. Where are people cyberbullied? This talks about the different social media platforms, and this time you'll see that the percentage is going up the right side. That's okay. Each graph might choose it differently. In this case, the graph is encouraging us to look at the different social media platforms first and then recognize the percent later. This is cyberbullying research from the United States, and it's asking which apps have the most cyberbullying going on. I think it's interesting to notice that some of the apps are more likely to be used by even younger users than others. So maybe we could look at how Facebook and Instagram have the greatest shares of bullying, whereas Twitter and YouTube have less bullying. Maybe that has to do with the ages people need to be in order to use those platforms, perhaps, right? Notice how I'm noticing things, throwing out potential conclusions, but I haven't necessarily arrived on why the data is this way. I just want to notice some of the differences. I'm noticing that Instagram has the highest rate of bullying, and young people only need to be 13 to have accounts on Instagram. Now, I know that there are some students who are even younger than that who have accounts, and I wonder what makes Instagram so prone to bullying. Maybe it's because it's a social media platform that is extremely visual and might lend itself to comparisons, right? Looking at how someone looks versus how someone else looks. Instagram also is a platform that used to have a lot of emphasis on how many likes something gets. Like Facebook, it counted the number of likes. And we know that sometimes that feature in a social media platform can increase how much people are taking in the negative effects of that social media platform. So Instagram has the highest percentage of folks bullied, with Facebook at a close second. Snapchat is following a bit behind that. WhatsApp is sharp decrease down. WhatsApp, YouTube, and Twitter are much less risky when it comes to bullying, and we have to wonder why that might be. Perhaps in WhatsApp, there's less anonymity. That means you're not anonymous. People know who you are because you're using a phone number. Just a guess, once again, wondering why that might have less bullying going on than somewhere like Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, where you can change your profile, change your name, and be a bit more anonymous than you can in WhatsApp. Finally, this is our third chart that we're going to look at, which is from the OCDE. And it said that there's more bullying and harassment in Mexico than in any of its 34 member countries. So these 34 member countries are the most developed countries in the world economically. So there are countries that we'll find in Europe, in the Americas, some countries in Africa, some countries in Asia, and then of course Australia as well. And so these countries are considered somewhat similar culturally, and Mexico stands out as the one with the most bullying. Let's look at some of these percentages. Our overall idea is that there's a lot of bullying in Mexico, and now we want to look at the percentages and make some guesses at why. About 40% of students in basic education, that means K through 12, say that they've experienced harassment. 40%, that's quite a few. That's 4 in every 10 students. 17% have experienced physical bullying. 45% about have experienced cyberbullying through social networks. 25% have been verbally insulted and threatened. According to the data from the UNAM and the IPN, of more than 26 million students in basic education, 60 to 70% have experienced violence at school, right? So even if they haven't been bullied, they may have more people experiencing violence at school. This is a huge problem that we need to fix. Finally, it says 18.8 million primary and middle school students in public and private schools have been victims of bullying. So as we compare these percentages, we can take the umbrella or the main idea as many, many students are experiencing violence, far more than half, 60% to 70%. Some of those are experiencing bullying, with the most popular type of bullying or the most common type of bullying being cyberbullying. So maybe we could connect the information that we got from this chart to the information we got from this chart, noting that in Mexico, one of the most common types of bullying is cyberbullying, and we could wonder which apps are people using in Mexico for bullying, which apps are people using incorrectly. So thank you for joining me for this second part of a segment on analyzing graphs and data. This is a really interesting part of generating information for our articles. Now, your next job is to do this assignment. Okay, so you are going to analyze this graph. You're going to write inside the green boxes that are blank. Okay, so this is the graph you just saw in the video. And you're going to follow step by step, just like we did in the past video, to write 5 sentences to create a paragraph. You could even write more if you write more than one in each box. That will help the reader understand this chart. Introduce the graph. What does the graph describe, and include the source? This comes from the National Center for Education Statistics in the United States. So you need to write something like that here. You're going to give overall details, the highest, the lowest, use phrases for comparing and contrasting. Go back to your PowerPoint to figure out what those phrases are. Then you're going to compare 2 pieces of similar information. Use words and phrases for similarity. Next, you'll compare 2 pieces of contrasting information. Use words and phrases for comparing and contrasting. Finally, you're going to give us some idea of probability. What do you think explains these numbers? Why do you think they are the way they are? Remember, you guys are experts in this topic. Like it or not, you are the age of people who are starting to experience bullying. You know what it's like to be a kid in school. You are a young person using social media. So I want to understand what you think is behind these numbers, because when we understand the meaning behind the data, we can get an idea of how we can find a solution. Thank you. Try this activity right now.